l'nefloiso chanun v'rachum Adonai. Teref nosam v'oreya yizkar lo'olam brisa. Koyach ma'asav higid li'amei losis lahem nachlas goyim. Ma'ase yodav emes mishpat namonim kol pikudam. Smuchim la'ad le'olam asuyim v'emes v'yosha. V'dus sholach la'amei tziva le'olam brisa. Kodesh v'nera shmoi. Reish is chochma yiras Adonai. Seichel tevel cholesehem tilosei emedes la'ad. So you might wonder why we chose this chapter, Tilim Kif Yud Aleph. So the reason why this chapter was chosen is because Pasuk 6 is very much related to our situation. In fact, it's very much related to today's day. Tonight is going to be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and we know that our claim to the land is because it says so in the Torah. So the first Rashi in Chumash says, how come the Torah starts with Breishis? The Torah should have started with HaChodesh HaZalachem, which is tonight, tomorrow, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's the first mitzvah, the first halacha. And Rashi answers and says, it's based on this pasuk in this kapitel. Chapter 111, pasuk 6. The strength of his works he related to his people. In other words, Hashem told us the whole story of creation in Bereshis, and the reason is to give them the inheritance of the nations. So the nations will come and say, you stole the land from us. We can tell them, no, that's not true. Hashem is the one who created the world. He owns everything. He's the owner. He possesses it, and therefore he can give it to whoever who wishes. So this pasuk is actually related to the situation in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so we're going to go into explaining a little bit the whole idea of opening a letter from the Rebbe and basically using that as something that's going to guide me in what to do, what not to do, how to do. So, of course, there's a lot of different opinions, like what else is new in our wonderful Jewish nation. There are a lot of different opinions. Some do it, some don't do it. Some are for it, some are against it. But I just want to say that there are different categories. There are people outside of Chabad, by the way, a lot of people that do it as well. But the people outside of Chabad that they will tell you, never heard such a thing. It seems like it's nonsense. Then I heard something more. Not only that it's nonsense, that it almost appears to be something prohibited, something like voodoo, sort of a magic. You open a book, and when it says in that book, that's what you follow. Doesn't sound Jewish. Then you have in Chabad itself, some people do it and some people don't, even in Chabad. No one, I think, in Chabad would say that, but the basis in Chabad is that they never heard the Rebbe say that this is something one should do. So even though it might be an interesting thing, and Hashgacha Pratis, but it's sort of a homemade thing. There's no basis for it. Where's the source for it? And then after we establish what is done and why it's done, and even if a person is not doing Igros Kodesh, I think it's still important to understand those that do it, and to realize that there's nothing wrong in what they're doing. It's 100% a positive thing, and it's based on Torah sources, and it's based on sources in the Sichos. It's not something which is homemade. I think this is pretty much the most frightening thing to be worried about when things are homemade. In other words, there's no source. Someone just thought of a good idea. And those are the things that are a little bit dangerous because you never know where you can go with that. One person will make up one homemade idea, another person another homemade idea, and then you can go sort of very far away from the original source. So it's very important, and we like to find everything we talk about is a source. So as usual, I came with my stack of papers. I don't want to burden you. I'm going to read, whoever wants to see the actual source, I think I made quite a few copies so you can have it. But let me start off with the following. First of all, is there any source that you can do something like opening up a book, and based on that, what it says there, you say it's Hashgach Pratis, therefore you follow what it says. So believe it or not, the source for such a thing is actually in the Shulchan Aruch itself. And whoever wants, we have copies here. So this sheet is a copy of the Shulchan Aruch, and guess where it is? In the laws of voodoo. This is the laws of voodoo and sorcery, things that you're not allowed to do. And here on the bottom is one of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch called Birki Yosef. It's very small letters. So on the other side of the page, I made it the bigger letters. So anyone wants, copies here, you can use this and read from here. And this is what it says. It says you're not allowed to do this because that's connected to sorcery or voodoo. You're not allowed to do that. And then he says the following. But according to all opinions, these are his words. I could just read it to you in English, but it's of course in Hebrew, in Rashi script. But according to all the opinions, it's permissible to open up a book of Torah to see which pasuk comes up, because Torah is our source of life. And we find this in the book of Yeshayahu, by the king Yeshayahu, that he actually did something based on a Sefer Torah, that when it was opened at a certain pasuk, and based on that, he did what he did. I'll soon go into that story. And then he writes, Birki Yosef. Who's the Birki Yosef? He's a commentator on the Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, if it's printed in every Shulchan Aruch, he's someone that the whole world, goes by. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he was the father of the Ridah, maybe. And he writes and brings this from the Medrash in Mishnah, where it says like this: if you want to take advice from the Torah, you can take advice from the Torah. In fact, David HaMelech also said that he takes advice from the Torah. Now he says, what do you mean take advice? The Torah is not advice. The Torah gives you rulings. So he says, this is what it means. That when it says in the Torah what to do, that's not advice, that's clear directives in the Torah. But it means if you don't know what to do, then you open the Torah and you look at which pasuk comes up, and based on that, you do the things that you do. And then he writes, I found in a sefer from an earlier Torah sage that he writes that he received this from his teacher, that whenever they were doubtful about what to do, what not to do, they would take a chumash, or they would take a book of the Tanakh, they would open it up, look at the top of the page, whatever pasuk came up, based on what it said there, based on that, they would use this as the Torah is advising them which way to go and what thing to do. And that's what it means to take advice from the Torah.
Who did he say did this?
The person who writes it, his name is Rabbi Kohen. He was the author of a sefer called Shevet Musar, and he writes that I received this from my Rebbes, from my teachers. So he's also basing it on a story in Tanakh. So what's the story in Tanakh? This I really would like to give you the copies, so you should follow me and see, because this is the origin, in a sense, for this. Let me give this out.
Which Shulchan Aruch is this?
This is the big Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo. Right. So if you want to look it up, anybody wants to look it up, or if you want, you can just take this, and here I'll tell you where to look it up. This is the sheet. No, that one's not good because it doesn't have. Oops. This one is better because it has the Kufay test, it has the source where it is. Yeah. Here it's even more clear. Great. Take this one. Okay. Yeah. And this I'd like to give out. 1 second. This is still the same thing. I want to give this out. Okay. This is my copy, and this you can give out for the rest of the place. We have to read this to understand the origin, but this is the story that he's referring to, the king Yeshayahu. Thank you. Let's look at page 325. It says that first, let me give an introduction that when Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Chumash that on the last day of his life he wrote 12 Torah scrolls, 13. He wrote 13 Torah scrolls. Each one was given to each tribe. And what about the 13th? The 13th was put in the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the urn and the luchos, not inside the box, but it was put on a board next to it. In earlier generations, I'm reading out from the top of the page, the Torah scroll had been stored in the urn together with the luchos. I don't think it was I think it was next to it, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. However, now it's been missing for a long time. They weren't sure why it was missing. It's possible that some Torah true Jews had it hidden during the reign of Achaz. Achaz was a king that was a Russia. And he was someone who worshipped idols and worshipped other gods. So therefore, they were afraid that he might, God forbid, use this Torah and desecrate it. So he shouldn't have a chance to change Hashem's name with the name of the idol. He might take the Torah and put in the name of those idols in there. So they put it away in a hiding place. And then, after he was no longer king and there was a new king and a good king, they found it. When this precious scroll was found, there should have been much rejoicing. But why wasn't there rejoicing? How shocked everyone was to discover that the Sefer Torah was not rolled to its beginning, Parshas Bereishis, but it was rolled to the middle somewhere, Parshas Kisavai, Book of Dvarim. And they opened it up, and the Torah predicts that the Jewish people go into exile. And this seemed like an evil omen. In other words, it seemed to them like a message that something bad is going to happen. The Kohen Gadol, his name is Chilkiyahu, instructed the Sofer. I just thought it would be easier to follow here, where it's written as a story rather than in the book itself. And he said, the next time when you visit the king to report on the progress of construction of the Beis HaMikdash, take the Sefer Torah with you, read it to him from the place where it was found. And Chilkiyahu wanted to arouse that the king should probably have to do tshuva. So Shaphan, who was in charge, brought it to the king. And he told him the work is progressing smoothly. It's almost finished. We have minted new coins. Again, he was the new king, so things had to be changed. But he was changing things in a positive way. Page on the bottom, you have 326. Then he said, there's something else which I want to discuss with you. An ancient Sefer Torah written by Moshe Rabbeinu himself had been discovered. Please permit me to read from it. And he read, it says like this, Hashem will lead you, meaning the Jewish people, and the king that you will set up over you, to a nation unknown to you and to your fathers, and they will be in exile there. The king's face lit up in joy when he heard about the discovery of the Torah, but now he was overcome with shock and grief. Hashem was most certainly giving him a sign that he was not a tzaddik, and Hashem is not pleased with him. On the contrary, Hashem is informing him that his nation was about to go to exile, like the kingdom of the 10 tribes. Apparently, he'd not done enough to make the people do tshuva. Again, he came after a different king that made them do avodah zarah. It was his responsibility that the entire nation should return to Torah and get rid of all the remnants of the idol worship. The king Yeshua tore his clothes in mourning and cried bitterly, showing Hashem that he admitted his guilt. At that time, there was a woman who was a prophetess. Her name was Huldah. The king sent a delegation to the prophet of Hashem, Who went? Who was in the delegation? The Kohen Gadol, Chilkiyahu, and the Sofer, his name was Shaphan. And he said, please find out from this prophet whether we're going to exile soon, like it looked like from the Torah. So even though he himself was righteous, he was afraid that he would be punished for the sins of those from before, and that he didn't succeed in changing it. Page 327. The delegation needed to consult one of the leading prophets of the generation, with Yirmiyahu and Tzefaniah, who prophesied to the men, and the prophet in Chulda used to speak to the women. And the group decided to go to Chulda. Why? Yirmiyahu could not be reached. He was traveling abroad. He was searching for the 10 tribes. He wanted to bring them back. He says he did find a few people from those tribes, but they went to Golos later again. But he rather chose the woman Cholda than to consult with a different prophet called Tzefaniah. Because women by nature are merciful, so hopefully she'll find more of a merciful way of interpreting things. Next paragraph. Chulda received the following prophetic message. It's a prophecy. So says Hashem, the words of the Torah which the king read will be fulfilled. I will bring all these bad things upon the land because the Jews have forsaken me. They're burning spices to other gods and they're angering me. However, you, Yeshayahu, are righteous. You humbled yourself when you heard about my anger, not because of fear of punishment, because you're in awe of me. You tore your clothes, you cried, you did the right thing. Therefore, even though the destruction of English and the exile of the kingdom of Yehuda was planned in heaven for your generation, the decree will be delayed. Your eyes will not see the evil I will bring upon this place. And he told him that after he dies, your soul will reside on my heavenly throne, and so on. When delegation related Chulda's message to the king, his immediate thought was the Beis Hamikdash will soon be destroyed. The holy Aron, which represents Hashem's heavenly throne and his resting place, must not fall into the impure hands. And that's when he gave the instructions that the Aron and everything that's in there, which was Aaron's stick, a jar of the mun, a flask filled with the oil that they used, and then there was also a box with golden objects printed. Oh, this is for another thing. Took it all and he hid it underneath. This is the story why the Aron was hidden underneath because of this whole story. So what do you see in this story? That what made all this big commotion? Because he opened up the Torah and it was written on that page. And because they opened up to that page, that was a sign from heaven that this is going to happen. So this is the source that when you open up a Chumash or another Sefer of Torah and you see it says something, it's a sign from heaven. Yeah.
So I want to preface that any questions I ask, I'm not against the doing of this. I want to be able to answer questions.
That's what we're all about, yes. Please do.
So, right, so you said a Sefer of Torah. Rebbe's letters, although the Rebbe is, of course, Adar and holy and is possibly more than that as well. At the end of the day, the letters are not. I think the letters are not.
So those are not a Torah scroll, but it's a set. It's not a Chumash, but it's a book of Torah. So the question is this only for a Chumash, or does it also apply to any book of Torah? The Rebbe's letters? Because the Rebbe's letters are all about what's the Torah directive, how to educate children, how you should deal with a marriage, how you should deal with the yeshiva. It's all about Torah directives about life. It's just a practical part of Torah, how to do things. And some things are halacha, some things are about, in the customs. It's all a Torah approach to life, what we're supposed to do.
According to that, then anything can be a Jewish written book.
No, if it's a Jewish novel, for example, first of all, you can ask another question. If everything's like Pratis, why only Torah? Why can't I open the New York Times? Someone asked me, and everything that's also Hashgacha Pratis. Lahavdil. So the reason why we're saying it's a Torah book, which we understand, is because the truth is everything is Hashgacha Pratis. If I walk down the street and they say a policeman there, it's Hashgacha Pratis. I don't know what it means. I don't understand why Hashem made that happen. Why did I get the red light? Or the other day I got the green light. And why did I see this newspaper on the floor and everything else? It's Hashgacha Pratis, but we don't understand it. But if it's in Torah, if the Hashgacha Pratis is in a Torah book, that means that I could expect to understand that it's a message there for me. Why? Because Torah is from Hashem. So therefore the Hashgacha Pratis there is more open. That's what it means. So that's why if I open a Torah book, that's the question is another question. You're asking a question, is it limited to a Chumash? Is it limited? For example, this story is an actual Torah scroll, and it's a Chumash. But this commentary on the Halacha says not only a Chumash, all the books of the 24 Svarim. What about a Gemara? What about other books of Torah? So that could be a question. Let's do the research. Does it only apply to that? But the first thing, the part that's most shocking to people is not the Chumash or not Chumash, is the idea that you open a book and based on that you do something. So here's the source that yes, when you open a book, if it's a proper book, then we can have a discussion which book is appropriate and which not.
When you said in heaven, the ancestors in heaven, did you mean heaven or did you mean heaven?
Shem. That's where we speak, we'll say heaven, yeah. Yeah.
The only difference I was wondering about is that like obviously publishing other books are published to like a wide audience, whereas the 11 are written to individuals. So whereas like the source that you can apply what the Rebbe said to individuals.
Okay, so that's another question. So I still want to go into the general before we go into this specific question. Again, if there's anyone that has a hard time with this, it's not about the Rebbe's letters. It's about the general idea. I mean, this is the reaction that I've heard. The general idea that you're going to base something on your life because you opened the book. Where does that come from? So I know many people were surprised, especially this person who told me it's voodoo. I said, actually, let's go look in the Shulchan Aruch, the laws of voodoo. And that's where it says that, this is something which is not only not prohibited, it's actually advised. Open the Torah book and you follow according to what it says. What I wanted to show is another thing. This is an interesting thing. Again, anybody wants, I can give you a copy. The person who was, I mentioned the other day in one of the classes, who was considered in America the greatest sort of authority of halacha was someone called Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. This is a book that Atzkrol gave out about his life. He lived here in America. So one of the stories in the book is, and you must have heard, that there's a very big, huge Torah community in a city called Lakewood. Ever heard that? Lakewood, New Jersey? That's not a Chabad community, Lakewood. In fact, it's a little bit not Chabad. So they write that the head of that yeshiva, whose name was Rabbi Cutler, he was debating whether he was in Europe, and he was debating should he move to Israel or should move to America. I'm just reading what it says in the book here, but anyone who wants could get it later to read it. And he decided to do something which he called Geirul Hagra, which means to draw lots, according to the Vilna Gaon, which was the great authority of the Litvish world. And he opened up a Chumash, and it said, and Hashem said to Aaron, go to Moshe in the desert. His name was Aaron. The greatest Torah leader in America then was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. America in the 1940s was a desert in terms of Yiddishkeit. It was like very little Yiddishkeit here. So he said, so that's because he had his father-in-law lived in Israel. But being that it said, and Hashem told Aaron, go to Moshe in the desert, that means that Hashem is telling him to go to America. And the whole Lakewood is based on opening up a book that told him to go to America. So it's not a, something, I just want to just bring another little thing how it's not just a Chabad thing. That's another thing. Then there's another thing I'd like to show you.
Revelation finds Stephen he always lived, he lived in Lakewood.
No, he lived actually in Manhattan in the Lower East Side, but he was the Torah leader in America at that time in the non-Hasidic world. And therefore, he was doubting, should I go to America where I have this Torah leader, or should I go to Israel where his father-in-law was also a Torah leader? And being that he opened this up and let's go to Moshe in the desert, that fit perfectly. America is like a desert in terms of Yiddishkeit. The rabbi who he would like to spend time with the Moshe Feinstein, his name was Aaron, so to him it was like that answer. So I'm saying the whole entire community in Lakewood is based on the fact that a book was opened, and based on that, he went to learn that.
Started Lakewood?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Then there's another book here. There's somebody very famous in Israel whose name was Rabbi Aryeh Levin. Maybe you read the book. It's called A Tzaddik in Our Times. And this person was famous for a lot of things, but one of the things they have in this book is something which he was extremely known for. Like this was like really sort of resonated in the whole country and the whole world, the Jewish world, was that there was a situation where, unfortunately, this is during the 1948 in Israel, where soldiers were killed. I think this was the group called Lamed Beis. 32 soldiers were killed. And not only they were killed, but the Arabs wouldn't even allow them to take the bodies for burial. And then finally, things changed, and they were able to take the bodies for burial, but there's no way of knowing which body is who. Again, they didn't have the kind of technology we have today. So they didn't know which body belongs to who. Right? It was Lamed Hay. There were 35 soldiers, Lamed Hay, that were killed. It was a crazy story. I think it was a story where they were on the way to a place called Gush Etzion, and they caught an Arab, and then they decided to let him go free, to have compassion on him. So he went back to his friends, who came back and killed all of them. That was the compassion. That was the thank you from the Arab. Yep. Anyway, so he took the books of Tanakh, and they had all the graves there, and they had all the names of the people. If you didn't know which name belongs to which body, and he opened a pasuk, and every pasuk had something in it, which is one of the names that were there. Again, here you have actually the names. One pasuk, his name was Binyamin, and the pasuk opened up with the word Binyamin. Another pasuk had in it Yaakov. Another pasuk had in it Yosef. Another pasuk had in it Elio. The names of the people in each pasuk that he opened up, and based on that, they buried each person in the appropriate place. Anyone who wants to know more about it, you can look it up on the internet. They'll tell you the whole story. Over here, it's under the Kabbalistic seminary. They helped identify the fallen Kabbalistic ceremony that helped to identify the fallen soldiers, the 35 fallen soldiers. So again, it wasn't everyone was fascinated by this. It strengthens everyone's emunah that the words that they came upon should come out to be 35, I think, was people, that each one, their name was there. That was a clear sign that it's from Shemayim. And again, this was not a Chabad thing. This was a thing that the whole world went by and the whole world followed it. Did the Rebbe ever acknowledge something like this? So here I have another sheet of paper, which is a Sikha, and the Rebbe gave the Sikha Topshin Mem Tes. By the way, this is called, I mentioned before, this is called Gero. What does Gero mean? Gero means drawing of lots. Means you just randomly pick up something and you assume that being that randomly, this is what came up, it's from Shamayim. Like in the story with Purim, but that was in the opposite. Haman randomly drew lots and it came out a certain month and he said, oh, that's a good time. But we also have it in the positive, in the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Kippur, right? There were two goats and they had to choose which goat would be a korban, and it was from Shamayim. Besides that, there was another thing. Every day in the Beis HaMikdash, how did they decide which Kohen does what? So many jobs to do. How did they decide? They drew lots. They chose. Every day, everyone chose a number, and every job had a number. And then if you chose number 10, you had job number 10. You had the job number 11. It's a whole process how it was done. And it says in the Go'inim, this is what the Rebbe talks about in the Sifra, that Geirel is from Shamayim. That when you pick up randomly and it turns out that this Kohen does this job, you have to look at it that Hashem chose this person for this job. And then he writes, whoever doesn't believe in the girl that it's for Shamayim, it's like he's denying the Seres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments. Yeah, this was in the Beis HaMikdash. And by the way, this wasn't altogether with the Book of Torah. This is just choosing numbers. Everyone had to choose a number. I mean, it wasn't choosing a number, it was a different kind of an arrangement, but it was like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And it turned out to be you. That's how it was. And then the Rebbe writes, comparing this to this, and it says it's known, there's an old ancient Jewish custom that if a person doesn't know what to do, and there's no clear directive in Torah which way to go, then you should open up a book of Torah, and whatever it opens up to, you look at this Hashgacha Pratzah, this is a sign from heaven that you should follow, that Hashem wants you to do A, B, or C. So this is the answer to the question, is the Rebbe saying, are we saying that, yes, it's a good thing, but the Rebbe never proved anything like this. So just showing you that this is what the Rebbe said. Yeah.
$1 million question. So,
I don't have so much money, but
so basically, what you're saying is that the answer comes from Shema. The answer comes from God. So when people do Adar, they don't, most at least, don't think that their answer is coming straight from Hashem. They think it's
even the Rebbe.
So
how does that go?
Not how it goes, not that.
How's that okay?
Okay.
The answer is, when people would walk into the Rebbe's room, people would write a letter to the Rebbe, and they would get advice. The belief was exactly the same thing, that a Rebbe is a tzaddik, and his answer is from Hashem. What? Of course, it's not the same thing. If Hashem would talk to me directly, that would be a little bit different. But there is something called Ruach HaKodesh. No, I'm saying Ruach HaKodesh means that when a tzaddik says, I remember we learned in the other class that if someone argued against what his Rebbe said, it's like arguing against Hashem. Remember that? Why? Because in being that this person is my Rebbe, and I assume that what he's saying to me is coming from a higher place and it's being channeled through him.
If we go to the county and we have any food with the Rebbe, then he's telling us, he has those little letters,
Right.
no doubt. But when we're opening a Sefer Torah, especially according to basically everything you just said, the answer is coming from Hashem, not an individual,
Directly.
not a son,
Right.
not a Jew, Hashem.
Right.
So how is it that we then do the conclusion that we're getting answers from the Rebbe and not the Rebbe?
Right. So what is that based on? That's based on the fact that this was the Rebbe's advice to people. This was after the Friedrich Rebbe passed away. So the Rebbe told people, again, these are all letters and secretly you can see. And first of all, where does the idea come from? Put a note into a sefer. So this also comes from the Rebbe, but it's not something which was introduced by the Rebbe. It was also done many years back. But the Rebbe writes, in reference to the Friedrich Rebbe, this was 1951, the year after the Friedrich Rebbe's passing, what should every chassid do on the day of Yud Shvat? And one of the things the Rebbe says is that every chassid should write a pan, then read the pan, picture as if they're standing in front of the Rebbe, read the pan, and take that piece of paper, the pan, and put it into a Torah book of the Friedrich Rebbe. And being that tzaddikim invest themselves in their Torah teachings, so when you put it into the Torah book, this is as if you're handing it to the Rebbe. This is how the Rebbe explained it. This is strictly for Chabad chassid. Someone's not Chabad doesn't have to buy it. But the Rebbe told us that when you open a book of a Rebbe and you put a pan into the pages of that book, then it's as if by putting it into the book, it's as if you're giving it to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe invests his essence into his Torah writing. That's number one. Number two, again, during that time, after the previous Rebbe's passing, and everybody was very confused, what do we do? And how do we know what to do? The Rebbe would tell people, a similar thing, to write upon. Either he would tell some people, he told them to bring it to the Ohel. Some people he told them, put it on the desk of my father-in-law in his room. And then he would say, and my father-in-law will find a way to answer your question or your request. Which means, if I believe when the Rebbe is here physically, that I can go to the Rebbe and get an answer, and I believe that the answer of the Rebbe is inspired from Hashem, and the answer that the Rebbe gives me is something which comes from a higher source, then just like it could be before, it could be now, the same thing. And just like it could be when the Rebbe speaks to me, it could also be through another way. Now, so basically, it's true that this is a combination of a few things. The idea that you open a Sefer in Torah, and you open it a certain page, it says Gocha Protis, and it shows you that this is some sort of sign from Shemayim. So number one is Igros Kodesh, a book of Torah, good question. So we can debate that question. But if it is a book of Torah, then it's the same thing. Number two, is it Hashem giving me an answer, or is Hashem giving me an answer through the Rebbe, because this is a book of Torah that is connected to the Rebbe. So being that our Rebbe told us, you write to my father-in-law, you put it in the pan, put it in, some people who told them to put it into a book, put it into the room of read it in the room of my father-in-law where he had yechidus. Some people he told that they should put it at the Ohel. So the Friedrich Rebbe told this story. This was in the first mimer that he said. He told the story twice. So I'm going to read it from the place where he gave it in more detail. He says when he was a young boy, he loved hearing stories. And he would develop the sort of a pattern that he would hear a story, and then he would go to his grandfather's room. His grandfather was the Rebbe Marash. And this is after the passing of the Rebbe Marash. He would sit down on a certain chair, close his eyes, and he would picture in his mind the story that he heard. And he used to picture it so vividly as if he was like living through it. One day he was in Cheder, and the story they told was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi used to come back to his family every Friday night and sit down by the table, just like during his lifetime. He went to his cheder, he went to the room of his grandfather, sat down on his chair, closed his eyes, and he imagined what it must have looked like. The family sitting by the table. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had passed away, and suddenly he comes to the house to make kiddush and be there by the Shabbos table. He was picturing in his mind. And as he's picturing his mind, he's thinking to himself that my grandfather was also a great tzaddik, and maybe he also comes to his room sometime. And as I'm thinking, I hear noise in the room. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, I open my eyes, and I see my father is standing He's wearing his Shabbos clothes. He's wearing his gartel. He's holding a piece of paper in front of him, reading it. Tears are coming down from his eyes. And he's facing the desk and the chair of my grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, where he always sat, where he used to receive people. And when I saw that, I was so overcome with fear that I quietly tiptoed out of the room and I left. In other words, it was very clear to him that the Rebbe Rashab is speaking to the Rebbe Marash. Well, where is he speaking? Standing in front of his desk. Now you could say, okay, so he's speaking to him, but who says that you also get an answer? So this is our Rebbe told us that when you write to a Rebbe, he will find a way to answer. The answer could be a friend that walks over to you and gives you good advice. The answer could be that you're looking for a job and just the next day someone offers you a job. The answer could be just the next day someone offers you a shidduch, and all sorts of interesting stories which have happened. And the answer could also be that when I open the Igros in a certain page, then I see, like this person wrote, tell Aaron, go to Moshe in America, go to Moshe to the desert, and he saw clearly that this is similar to what he's looking for as an answer. These are the sources. What you do need caution for is, not to twist it, not to do somersaults and say, well, being that it's on page number 8 or 89, and I have 89 hats in my hat, and therefore it must be talking about me. These are already things that people sort of add salt and pepper and spices and make their own changes. You look for something which is pretty clear, not something which is twisted. Yeah, you want to say something?
Where does it say that it said that when you write to a Rebbe, it's always when you answer?
This is in the Rebbe's letters, what the Rebbe wrote to people. In these are the words. The Rebbe said, I got your letter. And what you're asking, I think it's something that you should, being that you can't ask my father-in-law this question now, but if you stand connected to him, you can send your letter to it should be read by the Ohel, and the Rebbe will find his way how to answer you. In other words, let's say you hear a story from a shliach. I went to the Ohel and I wrote that we have this opportunity. We need $600,000 to buy the building, and we need a bracha. And the next thing you know, these are stories that actually happen. Next thing you know is that he meets someone and this and that, and somebody's ready to give him $600,000. So you could look at it, wow, it's amazing. Or as a chassid, he looks at it like the Rebbe is answering my request, and he prayed for me that this and this should happen. And that's what the Rebbe is saying. If you ask, he'll find his way. It doesn't mean it has to be this way. I know there are many people who say, I was at the Ohel, I walked out, I looked at the screen, I couldn't believe it. It's talking exactly about my situation. Or I saw my father standing there, my mother, and the Rebbe told him this and this, which I need to know right now. Is it just Hashgacha Pratis? So that itself is something which the Rebbe, through his prayers, arranged that I should see something which would be an answer to my question. So, again, if a person has the general belief in the Rebbe, it's not that far away to have this understanding also. But the point that I'm trying to bring out more than anything else is it's all based on sources. The only question you could say is a book of the Rebbe, which talks about how to daven, how to learn, how to do miktzayim, how to raise children. Is that considered a Torah book or it's not a Torah book? Our opinion as Chassidim is if it's the Rebbe's directive, everything the Rebbe tells us is part of Torah. It's a Torah teaching, and therefore it's called the Torah book. Yeah.
What was the sikha that you mentioned that, that if you don't believe about the Hashgacha Pratis?
That's the sikha of the Tovshem Memtes, where the Rebbe is talking about the girl that they did in the Beis Hamikdash, right? And they drew lots, which Kohen does which Avodah, and the Gaonim say that if you don't believe in that, it's like denying Aseres of the Bris. But then the Rebbe says, and this is similar to the idea, this is also like drawing lots, opening up a book and see what's going to be there randomly. By the way, what Mordechai did with the 3 children in the times of Purim was also like drawing lots. He stopped the child, give me a pasuk. And he said a pasuk, Al Tiru and Pachat Pisam. And Mordechai got very excited. Why? Because it was Hashgacha Pratis that this child should say this. Yeah.
Dave, people do this with the Igros Kodesh, like Adar and the other ones also.
So the truth, it applied to any Rebbe. If it's a book of a Rebbe, then we look at it as a book of Torah. But again, the reason why Hasidim will open the Rebbe's book is because, like everything else, they would ask the Rebbe the question. So they're looking at it. When I ask a question, I put it into a sefer. This is my way of asking the Rebbe the question, and I believe that he hears me and he's aware, and he's going to find a way to answer me. I know people who write into Igros, they don't open up to look for an answer. They just write in, and they wait to see what happens. Will something change? Will I bump into someone that's going to give me advice? Will I, or randomly something else will happen? But they just say, the Rebbe will find his way. I don't have to give him advice, how to give me an answer. He'll find his way. And then there are those that open up Igros Kodesh, and there are people who will tell you, and I've seen myself with my own eyes, incredible, not me, by the way, I'm one of those people who don't get too many answers when I open up. But there are people who get answers that are so on target that you can hardly believe that the letter wasn't written to them personally. Yeah.
Thank you. I was referring with the people like he was sitting in jail and thought about it, and I just feel like, it's just like it's not.
Remember put the
Well, like, if you didn't literally write about something and then so the person about something you're either thinking about or talking about, that's still relevant. And if you didn't explicitly ask.
I mean, yes and no, but let's say I was thinking about it, or I was thinking of asking, or I want to ask the Rebbe's question in my thoughts, and then I open it could be the same thing. I just think it's very helpful to sometimes ask a mashpia and tell them what had happened, and they should make that judgment. Because I also heard another thing, which is definitely wrong, where someone said, today we don't need a mashpia, we just open Igros and we go by that. That's totally against what the Rebbe told us, that everybody should have a mashpia. In fact, I would think if I have a doubt about something, the first thing I should do is not Igros. The first thing I should do is ask a mashpia. Mashpia says this is something which I feel, maybe you should try to see if you can get a clear answer from the Rebbe directly, then you go to Igros. But if a person replaces Igros instead of mashpia, that's definitely wrong. And another thing is, I just mentioned that I don't usually get answers. A lot of people will tell you, I never had such a thing. Every time I open, I see something clearly related to my question. So what it means when there's no answer, I don't know. It doesn't mean that the Rebbe is upset at me. It means for whatever reason, the Rebbe wants me to figure this out myself. Yeah.
We have people who don't get an answer from you. Like even if you don't understand these things, you need to believe that.
I think yes. I think it means that I will get my answer some other way. That's all.
No, but I mean, what you read is not associated towards your opinion. But still,
Is it an answer? No.
not an answer to the question, it's still a message to you.
I don't think, again, there's no Shulchan Aruch, so everyone's going to give you a different opinion. I just think that if you do that, then you might end up flying to Israel, then you'll go to Europe, and then you're going to go to England, because I open up a letter, it says about a trip to England. Okay, bye. It has to be in a way that I ask the question, and I look for something in the letter that relates to my question. Should I travel? Should I not travel? Should I invest in this business, not invest in this business, and so on. Yeah.
You always ask a mashpia before writing to the Igros.
I think it's better to do that before writing to Igros, yes. If you can, or if it's not possible, it's better because in mashpia, you're talking to somebody. We also believe that when mashpia gives me an answer, this is also an answer that's inspired by the Rebbe. I think I told you the story. There was an older chassid that his name was Rabbi Zalman Gerari. He told the story publicly more than once, that he asked the Rebbe a question. The Rebbe said, follow the advice of so-and-so. Being that he was so connected to the Rebbe, he writes back to the Rebbe, I'd rather have the Rebbe's personal advice. Why are you sending me to so-and-so? The Rebbe says, and what do you care if my personal advice is coming through so-and-so? So when the Rebbe told us to go to Mashpia, we didn't look at it like the Rebbe is abandoning us and sending, I have no time for you, go to Mashpia. For whatever reason, the Rebbe wanted us to get the answer through a mashpia. So I think the first initial thing we should do is ask a mashpia. And even that is considered the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe is the one who told us to go to mashpia. If things are not clear what the mashpia feels, I should write in. But a lot of times people, I think, write in because they don't want to ask a mashpia, and that's a little bit questionable. Yeah. Right. Same thing. You ask for a bracha. And again, unless you see something in the letter that says the opposite, you assume that you have the Rebbe's bracha. But what if you write to get engaged? Some people they open the Igros, it doesn't say anything with bracha for getting engaged. Okay, forget it. I don't think that's right because you can't force the Rebbe to write what as long as you don't find anything that says the opposite, then you assume you have the Rebbe's bracha. You did everything else which is according to the Rebbe's directive. You followed the process of shidduchim. You discussed things with the mashpia, so you followed everything the right way, and now you're writing the Rebbe for bracha. You assume you have the Rebbe's bracha. Again, the Rebbe definitely did not tell us that after Gimel Tammuz we should only go by Igros. There's no such thing. This is something which people came up with because of the desire to have more of a direct answer from the Rebbe. But definitely that doesn't overrule the Rebbe. There's another thing which is very important. Anything that's clearly in the Torah. I had a story here years ago with this woman who she was divorced. A divorced woman cannot marry a Kohen. She was older. She was having a hard time finding a shidduch. She was sitting by the Shabbos table, and she met this person by the Shabbos table who was absolutely the perfect person to marriage, of course. The problem is, he is a Kohen. Kohen can't marry a woman who's divorced. So they started to do research. Maybe he's not a real Kohen. Let's find out if he's really a Kohen. They did the research, and he's really a Kohen. Okay, it was very painful, but she gave it up. Came up another time, a few months later. And came up another time, a few months later. The last time it came up, she opened the Igros Kodesh and it said Mazel Tov. So she called me up and said, "Okay, I think I have a green light from the Rebbe." They told her, Chas v'shalom, Igros Kodesh is not about things which are in halacha. Do I have to keep Shabbos or not? There's no such thing. It says clearly, and even in Shulchan Aruch, it says only divrei reshus, which means things that are not clearly in Shulchan Aruch. Whether I should learn this Gemara, learn that Gemara. Should I teach my children this? Should I send my children to this yeshiva, that yeshiva? Should I study another year yeshiva or not? These are questions that are not, there's no Shulchan Aruch about it. These are the questions that I follow Igros Kodesh. But anything which is clearly in halacha, the whole concept of opening a book doesn't even begin to apply to something like that. So what does it mean that it said Mazel Tov? It means that this is not an answer to you. It's like opening up a letter and there's nothing there that applies to my question, which happens to me most of the time. Yeah. So don't get discouraged if it happens to you. You're not the only one. Yeah.
Hasidim only put the letter in the Igros or other books.
Some people could put it into a mimer. Some people could put it into sichas. Yeah. And again, remember, there's all things that people have that kind of feeling, no plural. But the basis that when you open a sefer, it means something is clear. The basis that I could write to the Rebbe and put a note into his sefer, that means something is clear. The basis that when I write to the Rebbe, I can expect the Rebbe is going to find a way to answer me, that's also clear. So all these things have their sources. It's not homemade. Yeah. Yes, I'm finishing. Yeah.
So I understand that the sources for the actual action. Are there any sources that say that the answer is coming from something that isn't outside of it?
Any source that it comes. The Rebbe.
Not Hashem, the Rebbe.
Yeah, that also doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen to that. I don't.
Again, this doesn't apply to Igros. When a person wrote to the Rebbe before, and the Rebbe gave an answer, or in Yechidus, the belief in the Rebbe means that we believe that the Rebbe's answer is divinely inspired, that Hashem inspires the tzaddik to give the proper answer. And this is the same thing. It's not different. It's just a different way how the answer is coming. But the idea that it's not the Rebbe using Hashem, on the contrary, Hashem is answering me through giving the Rebbe the answer. What? So where do you think it? Where does it sort of? Where can it be more fit in that Hashem should give the answer when it's something through physical? On the contrary, if it's spiritual, it's even less limited. It's even more conducive to say that Hashem gives the answer through that way. So you want to see if we can find the source of that also. Okay, if I found these sources, I'll find that source also. No, it's not really. It's a little bit of a challenge. It's not a booklet. Yeah.
Like, when do people, like, I mean, I know like sort of when people write Igros, like, it's more for, I don't know, like serious things. Or to do like, wait, to stay in yeshiva or not, or like you mentioned, like what.
I think so, yeah. This is, and again, I think that's more for my personal mashpia to guide me. And this is something which I should write to Igros, or just trust the mashpia's answer. That'll be good enough. Usually, if it's something a little bit more serious, and they feel they need a little bit more support for whichever way to go.
Right, because like some people are like always right for the Igros.
Someone told me she has Igros in her kitchen every time she has a question, she pulled that out. Is that the way you would have written the Rebbe before? Like every second ask another question? Right. So I definitely some people are taking it or using it in the wrong way. There's no question about it.
So there must be.
Yeah.
And you always have to prepare, right? Then it's like, sit on the couch, like, open the. You have to prepare yourself.
Well, that was said before. No, I could also have a question in my thoughts. Yeah, it's simple. Let's say this story with the Chumash. I don't know if the person wrote, he was probably thinking, and he opened it up. So thought also works. Hashem knows my thoughts.
I just want to say that the Rebbe sent us with you and it's so much and you want to we always get to say then that's real. Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, yeah.
So much
Okay.
fun. Well,
I can't say everything comes out of my mind, it's inspired by divine inspiration. Right, Thank you.
Thank you.
I might have